Hello and welcome to The Gist. I'm your host, Chris Vetrano, here every week to break down all the things happening in pop culture and interviewing the people that make it pop. On today's show, we are talking all about my latest obsession, The Traitors. I can't find anyone that wants to talk about it as much as I do. And so I knew I had to bring it to the podcast and I had to search high and low to find somebody. And I found the perfect person. He's been on the podcast before. He has his own podcast, Gabbing with Gib, and I think he might be a faithful. So please welcome back to The Gist, Gibson Johns.
I love that. You might be a faithful. I mean, listen, I think it would be more fun to be a traitor, but I agree. I
Totally.
think I'd probably be a faithful. TBD on if I'd be good at it. I don't think anybody's that good at it, but we'll get into that.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think like you're just so like I think you're too nice to be a traitor. I think like traitors have like a real I mean, we will as you said, we'll get into it, but you have to be a certain kind of person to go there.
I totally agree. You have to have it in you. I think that I do wonder if like going forward on this show, like if they should do more unexpected picks for the traders just to like
Yeah.
throw people off the scent. But again, we can get into it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the people this season that they picked to be traders, they absolutely have that in them. They have that side
Yes.
to them that they will stab anybody in the back to win. So
Totally. Yes. And as I said, like obsession, I'm trying to talk to I mean, the grocery store clerk, like I'll
right.
talk about the traders to anyone. It's so good. It has become the number one unscripted series in the US across all streaming platforms this season for very good reason because
hmm
it really truly is appointment television like we haven't had in many, many years.
Yeah, it's appointment television. It's delivering on the premise. It's delivering on the fact that it's brought together truly legends from every kind of sphere of reality TV. Like the people
Yeah.
from Survivor, the people from Big Brother, even the people from like Housewives, like they are legitimate legends in their spaces. And so to see them all to come together, like it's kind of this moment where I think if you were a fan of Survivor, you're a fan of Bravo, even you might like dismiss the show if there were other people
Hmm.
cast. But like if you're a Survivor fan, you're watching what Parvati's doing. If you're a Big Brother
Yeah.
fan, you're watching what Dan and Janelle are doing. Like you just are. And so
Hmm.
like that is exciting because you feel like everybody who knows what they're talking about is watching the show and paying attention. And it's created this like really fun discourse around it. So I've been truly loving the experience this season. It's delivering, like I said.
Yeah. And that's the difference between season one and two. In season one, we got
hmm
some reality TV stars with like the Brandy Glanvilles and Kate Chastains. We got some Survivor players,
hmm
but we also had like just normal, a dentist or, so I can't remember what everyone's job was, but, people just kind of off the street as well as contestants. And I think that's what this change of doing all reality stars has made it so captivating because they know what to do from whatever walk of life, from Survivor or Big Brother, or every show has its own sort of special, unique role that they play on it, and so they're all bringing what they know from their version of a reality show to this. And it's like making for this like incredible sort of captivating moment to watch it all come together.
100%. And it's also there's certain people who aren't from sort of the competition realm, but they're
Hmm.
still proving to be really adept at the competition side of this game. And so that's been really exciting to see sort of people tap into the untapped kind of areas that they have within themselves. But yeah,
Hmm.
I agree. Like, last season was great. The first season of the Traders is a great show too. But like it to me, we had this ending where this I don't know if you haven't watched skip. I guess I mean you're gonna get spoiled regardless. But if you
Oh
haven't
yeah,
watched the
there's
first
going to be
season,
spoiler
yeah,
alerts.
Sari, who's like the Survivor legend, but had never won Survivor. She has this what should have been like a fully triumphant moment at the end of the first
Hmm.
season of the Traitors because she finally won. But then there was this sort of like tinge of heartbreak for the two, like quote unquote normie faithfuls that she had
Hmm.
lied to and schemed the entire way to
Right.
win. But which I thought took away from her moment a little bit. I didn't feel bad for them, but the show wanted you to feel bad for them, and she felt bad for them. And so
Right.
I'm glad that we don't have to worry about that being a factor this time. Like I want it to be cutthroat. We don't have to
Yep.
think twice about slitting these people's throats because you know what? That is like what this game is all about, and that's when it's the best.
Totally. Totally. And I'm curious, have you watched any of the other countries of the Traitors?
I watched the first season of UK, which is all
Okay.
normies, like you probably
Yep.
know.
Yep.
I'm not like a VPN person, so I'm gonna wait until we get season 2 of UK on
Yeah.
Peacock, probably. I have not watched the Australian one, which I heard is great. So that's on my list. What about you?
Yeah. I just watched the UK one, and what made me think of it is it is all normal people, and, like, I found it way more emotional too, like,
Yes,
they in general, like, were way more invested and got, like, the bonds were being created because they had never done anything like this, so I think they weren't coming in as, like, celebrities or pseudo celebrities, but, I think at the end, not to spoil anything in there, but, like, and I won't so that other people can watch it because probably less people have seen that one.
yeah,
Because I actually think it's a great season. Like I
it
was very
is.
captivated by it. But in the end, there is some of that like deceit and is there a traitor amongst us? But it's like they're also had become such good friends that you were like, gosh, I don't even know who I'm rooting for at this point. I don't know if I want the traitor to win or if I want the other people. And so it was like uh, you didn't feel bad because one was a pseudo celebrity who potentially didn't need the money as much as the other person who's buying a house for their mom or something.
Totally, totally, and, like, there's something to be said, one, about sort of the clean slate that you come in with to a season that's, like, all completely new normal people, and I think that really works on the UK version.
Hmm.
Um, but and it's also, like, it also proves that the conceit of this show, which is essentially like a big game of Mafia,
Yeah.
it works. It's
Yeah.
compelling. It works regardless of who you swap into it, but I just think it should
Hmm.
be all or nothing in terms of what kinds of people we're slotting into the show. So I totally agree. The
Totally.
UK version was you really fell in love with some of those people by the end of that
Oh
season.
yeah. 100%. Well, let's talk cast before we get in because obviously last week's episode was huge development in the game.
Yeah.
And so I want to get into that. But before we do, let's take a step back into just the cast from season two, because as we've talked about, very captivating. And, maybe we'll start with like the Bravo folks. Like, how did you feel about seeing, we got four, I think, housewives, and, we have MJ from Shaw's of Sunset. Like, where were you kind of going in? Where were you like, oh, this was great, or this person's going to excel? And where have you been surprised?
I was never a really big Shaw's person, so I didn't have much of like an opinion on like where she could kind of go. She was kind of like a middle of the road pick, but like I've heard she's a star. Like I've seen her on Watch What Happens Live and things like that. So I was sort of like indifferent to MJ being on it, but she's
Yep.
proven to me to be pretty good at the game, and she's kind of like a dark horse for me, honestly. She
Hmm.
picked out Dan very early on.
Yep.
Um, and then with Tamra, it's like, she's highly competitive, that she's down. She's like down to be probably on any show. And like, I appreciate that about her. And you knew that she'd be like locked in. So I was excited about her. With Phaedra, I'm like, I'm personally loving the renaissance of Phaedra that we've been getting in the past couple years.
Yes.
She's been on like every show imaginable and she's delivering on every show
Yeah.
imaginable. It's like she's giving us moments and moment after moment after moment after moment. So I knew that she'd be good, regardless of whether she was a faithful or a traitor. And then
Yep.
Sheree and Larsa, it's kind of one of those things that it's sort of like, it's kind of like two what's the meme? Like it's like two clueless people like looking at each other and be like, exactly. Like that's sort of how I was feeling about Sheree and Larsa being on the show.
Yeah.
And honestly, Sheree has gotten very little camera time, but when she does, it's like a hilarious
Worth
little
it.
quip that's like at the
Yeah.
end. Exactly. We could talk about that where she's voting. And then with Larsa, honestly, it's been interesting with Larsa the most actually to me because she's having this extreme villain season on Miami where
Hmm.
she really fucked up with the Gertie thing.
Yep.
I truly don't believe she had malintent in that, but she's refusing to apologize for spreading the fact that she has breast cancer, even though Gertie asked her not to. And
Right.
so she's having like a really bad season on Miami in terms of like how people are thinking about her. But then she comes over to the Traitors, which is airing at the same time, and she's having this amazing. She had this amazing 4 or 5 episodes, however many she was
Yeah.
on, where she was kind of leading the charge. She picked out a traitor. She was getting great camera time, delivering great moments.
Yeah.
So you know
I
what? Like, good for Larsa, honestly,
yeah.
in terms of her performance on the Traitors. I thought,
And like it was, as you were saying, like it's kind of good for her that it's airing at the same time as Miami, because we are seeing a different side of her that's like, okay, she's got that. I mean, even like on Miami, them, making fun of the fact that she threw Marcus like a welcome home party, like after he was gone for 3 days or 5 days or whatever it was. But like the Traitors, you see them get split up, obviously, very early on, and she still plays the game. And it's like, okay, so she's not that nuts, like where she can't be without him.
Yeah.
And so we were able to kind of see both sides of her on these two different shows, which is amazing. And Sheree, as you mentioned, yeah, it's like amazing TV as Sheree always gives. But I'm not sure if Sheree is aware of how the game is played yet. And it's so comical every time she goes to vote. I mean, even like when they're like fighting at the round table, I mean, and they cut to Sheree, it's like Sheree does not understand. Like, I don't think she understands the concept yet of the show, but she's somehow making it through.
She's always stone faced. She's always just kind of looking around. She won the shield on the past episode. Like, even though she totally did not need it, she was not at risk of being murdered.
Yeah.
No, it's she's really fun to watch. Like, she will vote for the complete wrong person for
Mhm.
some. She'll literally say, I don't think you're a faithful, but I'm going to vote. I don't think you're a traitor, but I'm going to vote for you.
Yep.
And then when another faithful gets voted out, she's like, I am not happy right now. It's like,
Yeah.
Sheree, like I love it.
Yeah.
I truly do. Like
Yeah.
to me, we're getting the best of Sheree in terms of like
Yeah.
why we love her. So
Yeah. And what were your thoughts about seeing Kate Chastain back?
I loved Kate on season 1. I thought that she's just a breath of fresh when like kind of wherever you put her in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like she knows what people want from her. She knows how to give it to us without it seem hokey or sort of like stunty. Um she hasn't really like wasted any time getting into it on this season. Like
No. Yeah.
she kind of didn't really know what was going on, but she also picked up on it pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Um she's calling poverty at every 2 seconds, which is hilarious. And to me, she's the Greek chorus. She's the voice of the audience in many ways.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad they have somebody like her again on this show.
Yeah, I was a little bummed because I felt like she came in right as we lost Tamra. And
Hmm.
I was kind of curious to see the two of them play. Like I thought maybe we would get like a Brandy Kate sort of thing there, but
Right.
also like Kate stands on her own. And yeah, she has been incredible. She has jumped into the game. I was a little like, why are we bringing her in the middle? Like this feels
Right.
odd. And it was like, oh, I kind of wanted them to make her a traitor, maybe to like mix it up from our perspective of watching Kate. But then it's like, well, that's too obvious. And so, but she has not disappointed in anything that she's done so far and especially in this last episode, like coming to Phaedra's defense of like, Burgalicious was
Was
problematic
it
for you.
problematic for you? Exactly. No, like she helped save her Bravo sister, and I loved that. Like
Totally.
I
Yeah.
love to see that. And I think that you pointing out like her coming halfway through, it's totally valid because I think that my biggest complaint I think about the Traitors in general is just sort of like some of the rules are a little bit like there's some gray area and sort of what the
Hmm.
producers and whoever sort of is running the show can make happen. They can bring somebody in. The Traitors can recruit another person. The faithfuls never really know exactly how many traitors there are.
Yeah.
Like there are certain things that I'm like, okay, it's like pretty stacked for the Traitors to win this game or at least get to the end.
Yeah.
Um, which can be like a little frustrating because but I mean it's not a big complaint, but it just makes it really hard if you're a faithful, which makes it
Oh yeah.
really hard. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes it incredibly difficult to win the game because, as you said, like you don't really know when you're like, oh, we got three, but is it three? Is it four? Is it two? You never know, and that's
Hmm.
what makes it so good. Um, the other folks that I was like really excited to see, love seeing Trishelle back on TV. I think like she's a reality TV like legend in so many
Hmm.
ways, and I noticed like her and CT, and I think early on with Johnny Bananas, could see like the MTV folks like sort of banding together, and as you said, like all the Bravo like community kind of comes together. but I like when I'm really seeing like some of the cast start to mix up. Like I love
Hmm.
CT and Phaedra
Oh
pairing
my God.
together.
Love.
Her
Heaven.
castle daddy. Um,
Yeah.
but what like were there other folks on the cast? I don't watch like a lot of the other shows like Survivor and Big Brother and stuff, so I don't know those folks. Was there anyone that you were super excited?
Yeah, I am not a big challenge person. I'm aware of like who CT and Johnny Bananas and Trishelle are, and I've seen them on like other shows. Um, but I've watched every season of Survivor, every season of Big Brother, so I am very well versed in the Dan and Janelle of it all, and they're like legit legends in that space. Like they are huge stars. Sandra and Parvati, same thing. Like they're iconic, and they kind of have
Mhm.
like this rivalry, which kind of instantly makes them on this show compelling. Um, and I still sort of think this sort one of the sort of underlying storylines or through lines that I kind of hope bubbles to the surface at some point is this sort of like race between Sandra and Parvati to see who can get the other one out first, essentially. Because like they're very threatened by one another. They both think that they're sort of the queen of Survivor, and it's up. I guess I mean Sandra's won the show twice, so she kind of on paper is the queen, but I think Parvati is sort of this other giant in that world. That it's
Yeah.
really she's just compelling TV. I think regardless of where you slot her in.
Yeah, I was curious because it seemed like that's what they really set us up with in the beginning of this rivalry. And, Sandra, I think, says something like, the minute I smell her, like,
Uh
do
huh.
something shady, like, I'm going for her. And then I feel like it's just sort of died out. Like, we don't see a lot of them on opposing views. And I thought, like, oh, that's going to be this really dynamic thing. But also maybe that's yet to come.
Yeah, yeah. I think that and this is totally speculation, but I kind of think that Parvati, once she sort of linked up with Dan and saw the Dan and Janelle stuff, like Dan and Janelle especially was sticking her neck out a lot, and Dan was this other traitor. So I think that Parvati smartly sort of let the Big Brother stuff take center stage for a little bit. Like they got a lot of the attention in some of these early roundtables, and I forget who it was, but somebody I was talking to made the point of like Sandra plays really well, sort of at the bottom of the pack, like from behind. Like that's sort of how she played Survivor. Sort
Hmm.
of you think of her as this, you kind of like write her off as this sort of like not a threat in competitions, might not be getting it right, but like she ultimately is really good at the social game. So I kind of think that she hasn't really stuck her neck out in a big way yet in terms of like accusing somebody or things like
Hmm.
that. So I think she's waiting for her moment to pounce. That's sort of how she approaches these. And I think Parvati, even though she is a more aggressive player generally, she's let the Big Brother stuff kind of be the shield. It's almost like a shield for the Survivor people. Like,
Hmm.
okay, have that. And now they're both out. So I would presume that the Parvati Sandra stuff will start to emerge at some point soon, because if you're smart, if you've done your research at all, watching, if you're in the show, I mean, if you've done your research, you'd realize that Parvati and Sandra are huge threats. So one of them's going to go, I feel like, in the next couple of weeks. I really do think that, and he'll probably be Parvati.
Yeah, well, poverty too is interesting to me because I actually like didn't think that she was a good choice when they chose her to be a
Mm,
traitor because I felt like, and again, I knew nothing about her, but just having heard what Sandra was saying and like I'm gonna go for her, and then um, they kept calling her like the Black Widow,
yeah,
and I was like, well, if she's got this reputation, like that feels like she's very traitor like. And, but then people just really weren't going for her at all until like recently. And so I was like, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding, or maybe she's just that good at the game that she's bringing enough people into the alliance that she's convinced. But she doesn't like play convincing to me. That like that squinty face that she's like always making, like I feel like she's always like hiding something. So
yeah.
I'm like, I
I
feel like
know,
it's obvious.
I know. No, I mean that, and that's my biggest question for how these people play the game is like, and maybe none of them really watch each other's shows, and that's just how it is. But if you thought for 2 seconds like a producer, who would make great traders? Who would make, because they have to be good TV. They have to
Yeah.
be, like we said earlier, willing to stab you in the back. They have to do all these things and kind of have that X factor. And if you thought for 3 seconds, you'd realize that it has to be Dan or Janelle. It has to be one of the Big Brother legends. It's probably going to be one of the Survivor legends, Parvati or Sandra. And it's probably going to be one of the 4 housewives they brought into this show, right? Like
Right.
it's sort of like, okay, like think like a I don't understand why more of them, and maybe they are thinking like that. We just aren't seeing it because they don't want to like break the fourth wall. But I'm like, when you remember that moment when Larsa went to the wall and she was like, okay, it's a man, it's an alpha male. And she sort of picked out CT,
Hmm.
Dan, and maybe like one other person. That is essentially her thinking like a producer. You know what I mean? Like it
Hmm.
has to be a strong guy, and she was
Yeah.
right. So um I that to me is it kind of flummoxes me because I'm like, why aren't they thinking like this?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's where it's interesting too that you said like they don't know the rules because, or that they don't have all the rules, is that it
Right.
started with two. And so it started
Yeah.
Dan and Phaedra, and they recruited in Parvati. And that's like, because I was actually surprised that it was going to be Phaedra because I was like, I don't know how that's going to play. Like, I could see Phaedra be great as a faithful, but I didn't
Totally.
know how great she was going to be as a traitor. And my God, has she been great? I mean, we just the Ekin of it all and her Burgalicious. I mean, because she's done so good at bringing in all these people with the
Mhm.
Bergies and the CTs, and she has obviously Sheree is like in her corner. Um, Kate now is in the Bravo family. And so it's like she's got all of these kind of people that are just so willing to go to bat for her. But behind the scenes, she's a killer. I mean, she's
I
like, yeah, I'll
she's
cut their throat.
I feel like she has probably even surprised herself in terms of how locked in she's gotten and how like reactive she's been to certain betray or attempted betrayals on Dan and Parvati's parts. And there have been 2 times where she's ripped in, once to Parvati, once to Dan. And
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like nobody would have gone against her. Nobody. I really think that she
Yeah.
would have lasted till the end, but I'm really scared that Dan really blew up her game before he left by
Yeah.
picking her out as the one person he's been quote unquote watching since the beginning. And it's kind of annoying that he had to sink another Traitors game before he left. But we saw a little moment where Trishelle was shown in her confessional
Yeah.
being like, you know, I think there's a reason why Dan pointed out Phaedra. His back was against the wall, and I had a hunch that he was going to do this. And I think
Yeah.
Parvati he didn't choose Parvati because Parvati has already had a lot of heat on her. It's only a matter of time before she gets found out, I believe. And so it's he might as well uncover the other one, and now it's like Trishelle's on the case, and we saw that confessional for a reason. So I'm
Yeah.
scared for
Totally.
Phaedra.
I know. I am too. Because it was like, well, it's so obvious he could have just gone for Parvati and he probably wouldn't have gotten voted out because had
Right.
he brought the evidence against her, he would have had the votes for
Hmm.
her. The Phaedra vote was like a throwaway. Like he essentially did that to himself because no one else was going to Phaedra. And even after he tried to make the case against Phaedra, and everyone at the table is laughing at him, like
Hmm.
this is laughable. And he did not have the evidence that I think he thought he did, and everyone systematically, mostly Phaedra, put him in his place,
Hmm.
and I felt like he should have changed the vote at the end to be like, well, I'm going to go with Parvati then just for the voting.
Right.
But yeah, he did. And you're right about the Trishelle of it all. When she said that, I was like, yeah, he just literally exposed because why would a traitor who has his back against the wall put anybody else other than another traitor?
Hmm.
So that was disappointing to see. But my thought, and this is like where I mean, obviously we know um, that Pete has been recruited now to join the Traitors. I thought it should have been Trishelle for that very reason. And I know they don't know that Trishelle
Right.
was onto it, but I felt like Trishelle did have some sort of like conversations and she was starting to pick up on some stuff that I was like Trishelle would have been a perfect choice to recruit in that moment and bring over because then that would give the air cover for Phaedra and maybe even Parvati.
Totally. No, I agree. I do hope Pete accepts their invitation to be a traitor. and then maybe they murder Trishelle. That's my dream scenario.
Hmm.
But I agree. It's sort of, and they're in this like alliance together. It's like them and I don't even know who else is in that. I'm forgetting who else. Bergie's in that alliance. They have this sort
Hmm.
of like 4 to 5 person group that they're always sort of shown
Yeah.
talking with. Um, but yeah, Trishelle, I think is gonna get really far. I think that
Yeah.
Trishelle will stay a faithful, and I think that they're showing her a lot, and they're showing her be correct about a lot of things and make savvy game moves. And you have
Yeah.
to pay attention to the editing with these shows too, because it's sort of like, if you think about it, like this is what you learn on Survivor. Basically, is like they have to give the winner an arc throughout the show. So it's very like, in the first couple episodes of these shows where there's like all these people on a cast, you don't see everybody. There's not enough airtime for everybody to even talk on camera.
Hmm.
So, but if somebody's going to win at the end of the 18 episodes or whatever it is, the editors and the producers want there to have been an arc with this person. So you have to
Right.
also think about who they're showing in these
Yeah.
early days. And Trishelle is definitely top of mind for me in terms of one of those people that she's not a traitor, but she's sort of silent. She's sort of like low key helping lead the way on the faithful
Yeah.
side. Um, yeah, and she's in Peter's ear, so I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's my other thought is that I agree that they like either need to take Trishelle out because she's going to be onto it, or she is going to bring to the next roundtable. She's going to
Right.
bring this theory. I mean, she has to. I mean, unless she's holding it close for a reason, but she's going to say Dan was a traitor. He wanted to expose another traitor. He put Phaedra's name down. Why aren't we all voting Phaedra? And like she's going to start to turn people in that. I have to imagine in this upcoming episode. But so let's say we lose Phaedra. People are already on to Parvati.
Hmm.
I don't think her and Dan were playing that strong of a game. Actually, I think that they made some major missteps when they
Yeah,
tried to go for Phaedra, and then when he tried to do it again, it was like he's
they
not
turned too
showing me that
early.
he was this great. Yeah, it was way too
Yeah,
early, and it's like, okay, there's a chance that we actually don't have any of our original traders by the end of the show, that like
very true.
Pete then could usher in Trishelle. And
That's true.
like there could be something to your point of like Trishelle could have this crazy arc where she's like hardcore faithful and then all of a sudden changes to traitor who now has to lead the way the other direction.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I'm very curious as what's going to happen. I do think that with Dan getting banished, it the tides have officially turned on this season.
I totally agree. And people have pointed out that there is still this moment from the trailer that we have not seen where Phaedra lights into Pete at a round table. She says something along the lines of like, "This isn't The Bachelor. I don't need like you to give me a rose," basically. And
Mm,
so I don't know. I don't know what that tells us about whether he accepts the invitation or if he helps
mm,
Trishelle go after Phaedra. I don't know, but we haven't seen that moment, and they're going to show that because that it seems like another one of those like kind of iconic Phaedra moments that we're going to get before she gets banished probably at some point. So yeah, I don't know. I Pete
yeah.
is playing the best game out of anybody, I would say. He's leading the pack on the faithful side. It's almost like too obvious to eliminate him if you're a traitor, because like if they had chosen to murder Pete last time, it would have been like, oh, that's so obvious because he's on Dan's case. So it's sort of, if he continues to sniff it out and play right, he'll also go really far. Um, so he's impressing me
Well,
as well.
and I mean, the other big misstep that they had was that Bergie had that shield.
Hmm.
And Dan did say, like, Bergie's on my case. He's already told me he's putting my name down. So I've got to murder him. And, Parvati and Phaedra were like, yeah, I mean, just like, this is you. You're the one that's up for elimination, essentially. So, like, you take out the kill. But I was like, that again, that was also a bad move because Parvati said, I think Pete's lying to us. Like if he told both of us this information that he has the shield, he doesn't have it. And they still did that. And that was what I think sealed the fate for Dan. And obviously that's when everyone started looking at Pete like, oh
Hmm.
wow, Pete just played an expert move. Now he totally knows that it's probably both of these people, but at least one
Hmm.
of them. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of want him to become a traitor, but I think
Me
he's going
too.
to decline it. I
You
think
think so?
I think that he feels like he's onto them so much that in his head he's like, "Well, I know it's Parvati," and if he has had any thought about what Trishelle said, he could be like, "It's Parvati and Phaedra, and like let's just go in there and knock them both out." But I think that's what you don't remember about the rules is that like at some point
They'll have
there
had
is
somebody
going to
else.
be because they did this in the UK version where they didn't give I think the first person declined it. And then this second time that they were like, okay, now we have to bring in somebody else, they forced it. And they were like, you give
Right.
them an ultimatum of you become a traitor or you die tonight. And
Mm.
so someone wants to stay in the game, they're gonna be a traitor. So I almost like that better. I almost feel like if the traitors recruit you, you have to accept.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, it's interesting about Pete is like if he doesn't accept, I actually think that would be his fatal flaw because he would have been too confident. And he's on
Yeah.
he, he technically has basically found it out if he's on to Phaedra, but he's not bigger than the show, so like
Mhm.
he has to be smart enough to know that like, you know, he might find out he might get one more traitor in the next banishment or the next one after that. But ultimately there's a lot more game left to play. And so he is sort of he's sort of like the faithful at this point.
Mhm.
He's really leading the charge. And so for him to actually be a traitor would be the ultimate shield for himself. And also I
Mhm.
if he does accept, it'd be really that's a really hard charade to keep up of like still like going really because if he suddenly stops going full force as a faithful and like trying to find it out,
Yeah.
people are going to be on to him. So I don't know. He's in a tough spot actually with
Yeah.
this offer. He really is.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I mean, obviously I wish that, they released them like Ultimate Girls Trips and
I'm
episodes of
glad they
3.
don't. I'm glad they
I know.
don't. I like this week to week. It's like it does feel like a month between episodes, but
So
it
long.
makes every episode individually such a moment, and like
Yeah.
it lets it breathe, and the
Yeah.
anticipation for this finale that we're gonna get is gonna be so good, and
Yeah.
we're getting a reunion, which is amazing.
I know. I mean, that's going to be epic. And I think that you're right about that too. As you were saying that, I was like that I feel is maybe what like Ultimate Girls Trip flaw is that they release the 3 and like you don't get a lot of like meme worthy moments because
Hmm.
you're getting so much content that like you actually like could have found like a really great moment from Dorinda dancing in the pool, but actually it was like just thrown into 3 episodes that were released. And so it's like maybe it's too much to do all of that. But
I know.
I just am like as you said, it's like a month in between each week, and I'm like, "Oh my god, is it time? Can I tune in again yet? I need to know what's
Literally,
happening."
I
I mean,
know. I know.
I watched UK specifically because I was like, "Okay, I need more traders
There's like
content."
there's a big hole in your heart for traders. You need to fill it, right? I totally.
So I
That's why I'm like maybe I do Australia. Maybe I do it in
oh,
between.
I for sure will. Like I have to. I mean, I'm sure after this week's episode, I will be chomping at the bit for something new and I
Hmm.
think maybe Australia has 2 seasons. Might be wrong.
It might. I'm pretty sure that UK is airing a second season right now. I
Yeah.
know maybe Australia is the same way, but so hopefully we get those on Peacock ASAP.
Yes, please.
But yeah,
Please.
Traders Nation
Um,
has
I
to be a part
know.
of it.
Yeah, I know. It's so amazing. Well, any other like thoughts on this season or where we go from here that we haven't covered?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I feel like we've hit all the big players. I will say that like as much as I was familiar with a lot of these people, it's kind of fun to get attached to some of these people that I personally was not familiar with. Like I don't watch Love Island, and Birdie to me is like the sweetheart of the show.
Yeah.
Even like I used to watch The Bachelor and Bachelorette. I don't really anymore. To
Yeah.
me, Pilot Pete, as we said, is like taking it. He is doing so well. Um, and then I just even like John, that like random British Parliament guy. Like I really barely knew who he was, but he's coming in. Like, he had a great roundtable moment the other
Oh
day,
my
and like
god, so
it's
good.
just it's fun to have these sort of random personalities that have existed in other people's worlds but not
Yeah,
your own, and to sort of grow attachment for them. And it's kind of that I there's so many like cool elements that go into the mixing pot of making Traitors so unique in such a moment every time,
yeah.
and that's part of it for me for sure.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see what happens with Kate because I do think that she, like as you said, jumped into the game so quickly, but she, was such a fan favorite from season one, but didn't end up winning, didn't make it to the end. I wonder if she makes it to the end this time and gets sort of like her moment.
Yeah, I'm curious. She definitely seems more locked in this time. Like last first season, she kind of threw in the towel. She didn't want to be there. She just kind of like gave us
Yeah.
funny moments because she wasn't into it. She definitely seems like genuinely more into it this time, and I think that that was smart of her to not try to like totally rehash the same shtick from the first season. Um, I think that she's smart enough to know that she can give us the funny "I don't give a fuck" moments, but also giving a fuck. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Like I would love to see her make it to the end again. Like I'm kind of upset that we've lost several of our Bravo ladies already. Like I was hoping they would stick it out. Um, so, and I think that she has good instinct. I even though she was wrong to defend Phaedra technically, she was right kind of big picture wise, in my opinion. Because maybe also it's like the unfortunate thing about the Housewives, how the Housewives thing has played out in this season is like they were smart enough to stick together. They knew they should be a group, but they didn't because they don't come from the reality competition background. They didn't realize that it would have been really smart to vote all together and
Right.
to actually have a classic alliance where you kind of get on the same page about who you're going to vote for, because that
Yeah.
actually would have saved Larsa when she got banished. But they all
Hmm.
vote, like a couple of them voted for random people, and it's like, guys, like you have the numbers, and so hope maybe Kate can be kind of somebody like that where we can still have Kate, MJ, Sheree, and Phaedra
Yeah.
as a Bravo unit. I think that would be smart to do that because the numbers are dwindling. So four is still a really good sort of block of votes to
Hmm.
have, aimed at
Yep.
one person. So I actually think that Phaedra would be really smart to kind of seek out Kate and sort of make that happen.
Yeah, and I mean, because she has Sheree. If she can just get Sheree to like dial into the
Totally.
game and vote for
And
like
MJ
someone,
too. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
and MJ, but MJ has like a lot of theories too. So
That's true.
she's not as easily swayed. Where I think that like Kate and MJ are probably like the two strategic ones of that group, and then Sheree will go with the group, and if Phaedra goes with the group, then they get that alliance. So I think that would be really
Yeah.
smart. Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
interesting to see. Well, we definitely have a lot more to watch. And of course, we'll be continuing to chat about it online because I can't get enough.
Can't help ourselves.
Exactly. But before we go, I know obviously like you're a big Vanderpump fan. We just got the
Hmm.
the new season, the premiere last week. Tell me kind of what are your thoughts for this season? Are we in for what we got last year?
I don't think we're in for what we got last year. I think about it in the way of like, it was at such a high. There's really only one direction for anything to go, any person, any show,
Mhm.
anything to go after being at such an apex of like culture and drama and like the zeitgeist. Like it doesn't get any bigger than what Vanderpump Rules was at the end of last season. So just, I mean, by the way that like the laws of nature work, we're not going to get what we got last season. Um, I still am interested to see the fallout. I know there's a lot of scandal fatigue, and I understand that, and I feel some of that. But I think that my hope is that they have kept enough from us in terms of what was really going on in those summer months of like,
Right.
we know a lot in terms of what made headlines and sort of what leaked from people like watching them film scenes in public. But I do think, I mean, when the trailer dropped, the whole Sheena Schwartz like storyline of like them maybe
Yeah.
having had made out back in Vegas one time, like that was totally new. We had no idea. We had no
Mhm.
idea that Lala sent Rachel a voice note. So like there are little things that are already sort of surprises, and so I hope that there are things like that scattered throughout, and that personally would keep me interested because I
Yeah.
think there are these little nuggets, but also the other thing that I will say is like I really hope they lean into a little bit of the breaking the fourth wall of this scandal in terms of I talked about this with Kate Casey recently, and she was saying like, I want to hear about how much money they're making. I want to hear about the merch and all the opportunities they're getting. Is there sort of like a jealousy or competitive nature of some of that stuff? Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that would keep me really interested.
Yep.
And who knows if we'll actually get that? I kind of doubt we'll get a lot of that, but that to me is like, okay, let's acknowledge how this changed the game
Yeah.
for this group of people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little worried. Like the Lala thing to me felt like producer driven. Like we need Rachel back on the season, and we need her to have some entryway. So, like, would you
For
be
sure.
willing to give an olive branch and like have a sit down with her? And like, will you go film, this like voice note that you send her? Like, it felt like they were trying to bring her back, and then we know that she
Mhm.
ultimately decided after it started filming that she was not going to come back. So I think that felt in a way a little bit desperate to me, and so I'm hoping that's not what we're getting. It's like we're not trying to like overproduce the
Right.
fallout and like bring all of these things together, because I
Totally
would
see that.
love much more real. I would love for them to sit around and be like, Lala be like, yeah, I reached out to her because like we're on a show together, or we're like we need to hang out for these reasons, and like I want to give her an opportunity to like sit down and have a moment, but I still got your back, and to have like a little bit more of that. And I think that's we're I don't know. I'm nervous going into it
Mhm.
because, as you said, Sandoval or Scandival fatigue, and I'm like, are we? I don't know if we're even like ready for it yet, but we'll
I
see.
know. I know. It's a really hard thing, and that like you said, I think one of the an opportunity for them to be like, okay, the reason why we're around this person is because we're in this environment. They go on a cast trip to Lake Tahoe, and like, why is Sandoval there with Ariana and like all the girls? Like, say it's because are in this sort of forced friend group still, and
Yeah,
then we believe it, but
yeah,
if there's some like weird other reason given, I'll be disappointed. And I do think the other thing I'm kind of watching is, like you said, it's very clear they wanted Rachel back at this point. They still thought they
mhm,
could get her. They thought they could give her a big enough paycheck. Lala could represent this way in of like having sympathy for her. But at a certain point, it becomes clear they're not going to get her. She gives them a
right.
hard no at a certain point, like kind of midway through the production, I'm pretty sure. I think it's actually when they go to Tahoe. She said something on her podcast, which I don't always listen to, but I've seen like clips, whatever.
Yeah,
So when that happens, I'm really curious if we get a pivot. If we will notice like, okay, production has accepted that Rachel is not returning to the show. Any storyline they wanted to unfold involving her is not going to happen. So how do we fill the rest of the season? I'm super curious about that moment. What does that
mhm,
look like? How do they change it up enough and fill the space
yeah,
basically?
yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it just got started. We know that we're getting the spin-off series with Jax and Kristen, and it sounds like that kicks off with a confrontation between Jax and Tom Sandoval. And I am envisioning that there is going to be some kind of Beverly Hills into Vanderpump Rules, the way that they introduced us to Vanderpump Rules initially, that we're going to get, or it's going to be like the finale of Vanderpump Rules and
Right.
into this new show. But yeah, I'm curious. I'll definitely be tuning in. And then the last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on. We've talked a lot about Phaedra, obviously,
Hmm.
and her sort of resurrection. We also learned this last week that Kandi has left the Real Housewives of Atlanta, which I think it was
Hmm.
time, and I think that this is a good thing. There's rumors online that like Kenya and Portia are returning, but there's also rumors that maybe Phaedra is being called out in the mix of this as well, because people are saying she didn't land on Married to Medicine the way that they had hoped. What are your thoughts? Do we bring Phaedra back to Atlanta now that Candy's out of the way?
I would support it, to be honest. I do think that Portia and Kenya is a big enough duo to make me really interested in Atlanta.
Hmm.
And to sort of see that unfold, like that's sort of that's what the show needs. But with Phaedra in the mix of that, that is
Gold.
unmissable television, in my opinion. It takes it up to the next level. I almost wonder if we get a Portia Kenya season and then they give us Phaedra, because I think it's a little bit. Listen, I'd be down to watch Phaedra on Atlanta again,
Yeah.
but I actually think it's like almost like a little disrespectful and like not missing a beat by just like Kandi being out and then Phaedra in like that is
Yeah.
it's quite the look, I
Yeah.
think, to do that. But I also think I agree. Like she was pretty great as sort of Quad's new dynamic duo partner on Married to Medicine for the first several episodes of this season, but then everyone sort of abandons Quad, and now Phaedra
Hmm.
like basically doesn't contribute anything. She doesn't even say anything on the show anymore. It's like
Yeah.
it's really honestly, as we talked about earlier, like every other show she's been on since this sort of like resurrection of hers, she's been so plugged in. She's been so
Yeah.
vocal. She's been so in the mix and in the spotlight, honestly. And then on Married to Medicine, it's like she's not like that. And I'm really curious why. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's the fact that like that show has 4 to 5 like essential OGs who have been around forever and they're the sort of giants of the show. And she is just kind of being usurped by them. I don't know. But it's really interesting. And I
Hmm.
agree, it's not really quite working. So have her on the Traitors, have her wrap up the season of Married to Medicine, film the new season of Atlanta, and then give us Phaedra. That's what I want. That's
Okay.
my vote.
Okay.
What about you?
I mean, I don't know. I agree with you on the Married to Medicine. It just didn't land. It's like we've seen her so dynamic, even in her like little cameo on Dubai a couple of years ago, and then the Ultimate Girls Trips, and obviously she's given
Right.
so much to Traitors. So it's like, wow, it really fell flat. And as you were talking about, like where if the fourth wall is not being addressed, is like she is there not married to medicine. Like they tried to make her like dating some doctor that we never saw, and then it was like, oh, they broke up, but now she's like potentially going to date another doctor, and it's like
Right.
this all feels too like forced and
It's too
phony.
loose. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I think this is why it's not playing. And it's like, if you want Phaedra to be Phaedra, you put her back where she belongs, which is where we met her, and that's on Atlanta. But I agree that like it would be very clear that like, okay, Kandi is gone. It opened the door for Phaedra, and we took that opportunity. Whichever one of those things came first, we would never know. But
Right.
I I think that like also when Traitors ends, and as you were maybe hinting, if Phaedra goes soon, like I'm gonna need some Phaedra. So I don't know.
Totally. Listen,
I
totally.
need her.
And the other option, or the not the other option, the additional idea, put Quad on to Atlanta too.
Hmm.
Quad has been
Yeah,
essentially voted off the island on Married to Medicine.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Quad lives in Atlanta. She's a huge star. The group on Married to Medicine clearly does not want to film with her anymore. She's friends with the Atlanta ladies. I think some of them
Hmm.
at least.
Yeah.
Put her on there. And if you put Phaedra on
Yeah.
there, there's an inherent storyline in there too of you abandoned me in this other friend
Hmm.
group. It'd be
Yeah.
kind of this really cool meta interesting moment that I would kind of love.
Yeah. No, I've seen that online. People have said like, well, what are your thoughts? Do you think that like a quad could join? I think that would be perfect. And I think
Hmm.
that would also make the sense of the story of like them coming from Married to Medicine over to Atlanta
Right.
together in this way of like, I think that it would make sense to viewers rather than, I mean, the only other sort of option in my mind is that we get Ultimate Girls Trip 4, or which will now be 5, but the fourth one that they filmed, which Phaedra's there, and we get that,
Hmm.
and then she's back. But I don't know if we're getting Ultimate Girls Trip 4.
I don't
So
think we are. Yeah, I really
yeah,
don't think we are.
which is devastating.
It's devastating, but at this point, it's just too like. I even think that watching it, regardless of
Would
how
be
I
weird.
think, it would just feel weird, Like it would just feel kind of
Yeah.
icky. And like obviously, I would love to see Alex McCord. I would love to see how that played out. I would love to see more Phaedra. I would love to see a lot of this, but the whole thing just feels. I don't know if I would. I don't. I would watch it, but I don't know if it would feel good watching it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know I mean, what a devastating loss
I
to
know.
bring all of those people together. And then, I mean, even the Camille, and I think it would have been epic.
I
And
totally agree. We got Eva
it's so
again, who was
sad.
great on Girls Trip. Like, there were some
Hmm.
great
Yeah,
what could have been.
I know. And only, the producers there have the footage. So
Mhm.
it's like, I would love it. But yeah, I would love to see Phaedra back on TVs in whatever capacity. And I don't think it's Married to Medicine. So I,
Mhm.
I would welcome her back, but I also think Atlanta needs something fresh. It's been I think we're done with Marlo. I think that like there's just folks that I'm like, I think I could be done. Phaedra or Portia and Kenya, I think is a great duo to sort of build a new cast around.
Mhm.
But Phaedra, I feel like would be sort of a bridge between the two of them in a way that really would be this iconic moment back for them. But we'll see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. There's a lot.
Awesome.
I think for last thing I'll say, there's been a lot of like negative energy around Atlanta and like disappointment in this past season, all this stuff.
Yeah.
But all these ideas that we're talking about, which are all pretty plausible in my opinion, makes me excited about Atlanta again. And that is a very welcome feeling, honestly. It's like fun to
Yeah.
be talking about it right now. And I think they'll deliver on some of these rumors and theories. I really do. So
Yeah.
I actually think that they're in a position to succeed. We said Vanderpump Rules, only way to go from that high was down. Right now, Atlanta, the only way for them to go is up. And
Yeah.
that's
Agreed.
exciting too.
Yeah, I can't wait. And I know a lot of the others have kind of taken a pause. We aren't like picking up cameras yet in New York. There's some there's going to be a bit of a delay. I don't think we're going to get as many housewives this year as we have in years past.
Mhm.
So I'm fine with them taking a little break to retool and come back with something really exciting, which is where I think we're headed with Atlanta. And, obviously thrilled that Salt Lake City has got cameras up again this week. So we'll see but that's another where it could be a Vanderpump. I don't
Yeah,
know where
yeah.
else we go. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, cool. Well, again, thank you for talking Traitors with me because it's my obsession and I can't wait. And we'll definitely have to stay in touch
Hmm.
on as the season plays out. But tell everyone where they can listen to your podcast and follow you so that they can continue to get all your thoughts on all the
Yes.
Bravo
Y-
universe.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Gabbing with Gib. We do 2 new episodes a week. Tuesdays, it's usually an interview with a Bravo celebrity. So I've had like Crystal on, Gertie was on this week, Nicole and Alexia. So I get a lot of Bravo celebrities on. And then Fridays are discussions like this one that we just had, where I pick a topic and we'll just kind of do a deep dive onto a show or a couple of shows. So yeah, new episodes Tuesday and Fridays, wherever you listen to your podcast. And then you can follow me at Gibsonoma, Gibsonoma, across socials.
Yes, and always sharing your thoughts there, which are amazing, and definitely on TikTok. I feel like you give us like a little glimpses of your podcast by like giving us the
Yes.
voiceovers on your thoughts. So follow you
Yes.
there too.
Yes. Totally.
Awesome.
Oh my God, this was
Well,
so much
Gibson,
fun.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, it's always fun to chat
Always
with
fun.
you, and we will do it again soon. I hope.
Yeah. I'll have to have you on my podcast sometime soon. So we'll do
Yeah,
it.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for all of you, thanks so much for listening. You can follow me at CM Vetrano on all the platforms, and don't forget rate and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And until next week, it's Gibson and Chris. We are signing off. Bye.
Bye.